Hello there, how are you? So today we're going to use some cards. I actually did a shuffle of cards last night and did an entire video, but the video is just too long, so I'm going to try to get through this more quickly. Then I recorded the video again today and there was absolutely no sound. So I guess the third time is the charm, right? But my question is, and was then when I was shuffling, since people are waking up to the Matrix, right? Um, and are realizing that just certain things are no longer acceptable in terms of the way that we've been living within that matrix. What is it that we need to know? What is it that we need to do in order to navigate it and get through this transformation on a collective level, but also on a personal note, right? And I was particularly thinking about the intuitives who have already began to sort of make changes within their own personal lives and how different that looks to others who don't fully understand yet or haven't quite awakened to it yet. And so it's the matrix, right? So if we think about planet Earth being a perceived reality, as my guides told me, and I mentioned in that last video that I did about Earth 2, then the matrix exists within that. And I always think of the matrix as something that's a little more man-made, right? It's like on that level where it connects with us in the 3D where we create. It's those interlocking understandings of how life is supposed to be, the systems that we exist within, the beliefs, um, the understanding of what, ideals there are within a society that we strive for. So like here in the United States, for example, there's a certain, understanding of like the American dream and how we're supposed to have that picket fence and, 2.5 kids and a dog. And so that is all a part of the matrix. And throughout history, they have the elites, and I'll get to that in a second. They have sort of reinforced, that matrix as we have evolved, right? They've introduced things like the credit scoring system in the late 70s to early 80s, where right after the civil rights movement. And I just wanted to ask and to peek in on how that's going for us in terms of separating ourselves from this matrix that is glitching right before our eyes. We've had many people report, right, the glitches in the matrix where they've gone to sleep and they had a dream that they were in an entirely different reality of theirs, and it felt like what felt like seven or several years that they were in that reality, only to wake up back in the reality that they've known, and now they're terribly confused. We've also experienced glitches, at least I have, where I was kind of looking at myself in an alternate reality, and then people try to say, oh no, that's just a manifestation of your thoughts, or there was something else that someone mentioned, and I'm like, no, no, I have enough discernment to know when it's not a thing that I've already experienced before. And it was definitely a time where I experienced looking at myself in one of those alternative realities, or alternate realities. So, like I said, just wanted to do a reading on that. And I'm going to be using the Pocket Archetypes deck from the Wild Unknown because I feel like this deck is really insightful in terms of this question here about the matrix, and how we are moving through it. And so the matrix, right, before I get to reading the cards, is, like I was saying, that structure within the perceived reality that is put together. And what I have become, what I have began to understand is that there are fourth dimensional beings, right? So if we think about the fourth dimension as being that pass through dimension that connects the higher dimensions with the lower dimensions, the third dimension where we are here in this physical and where we create our reality. And then we've got the second dimension, and some people think of that as, our thoughts and our mental state and that egoic um, plane of existence. And the Pleiadians, I believe, also thought of it as the Earth's crust, right? So right there at the Earth's crust. And then we've got the first dimension, which is just existence without ego, right? And the Pleiadians thought of that as also the inner core of the earth. And so they've got an entirely different chakra system where it's not the root chakra, it is actually that lower chakra is touching upon the inner core of the earth. So, okay, with that though, lots of fourth dimensional beings hang out in the fourth dimension. They can influence things, they can create things, they can keep things like that war mentality continuing, but they can't necessarily create in the 3D, which is why they then manipulate the way we feel and the way we understand things, so then we can in the 3D like live out their desires, so to speak. So that's what I have been kind of understanding on a deeper level. And with that, we've got many elites who understand how to also manipulate on that same level through symbols. And they do so to further their agenda, right? So if we are waking up to this matrix that we exist within, that has filtered down into our thoughts and the ways that we feel, which then influences our actions, then how do we break away from that when all of us collectively are kind of waking up and saying, this is not the way that life should be, especially, since it's also not what we need. It's not even serving our needs at the moment. So the first card up is the dead end. And then we've got the second card, which is the apocalypses. And we've got the storm card. And we've got the tear. And we've also got the riddle. And then I pulled two cards from the Celestial Bodies deck, which is the Void of the Course and the Cancer card. So that dead end card is really encapsulating what I was talking about, right? Look, you can see like the webbing that's happening, that's representing, I will say, the matrix that we're kind of breaking ourselves out of here, understanding more about and realizing that we are within, right? And a dead end is also a beginning. And so with this deck, we've got 4 different categories: the selves, the places, the tools, and also the initiations. And so this is a place within the deck. And I'm just going to read a little bit about it. So the dead end, from the tiny little booklet that they include, it says, reflect on dead ends in your past that led to unimaginable wonders. The moment you accept the ending, a feeling of grace will arise. Doors begin to open both inside you and the world. And then it says, note that in most stories and movies, the moment the protagonist reaches the dead end, something riveting happens. You are the protagonist. So in light, it is acceptance and humility, relief and reverence for change. And when in dark, it's the inertia, stuckness, the tension, the unconscious gripping. Okay, and then it says, contrary to what its name implies, the dead end is very much alive. It is a force that stops us from moving forward as planned. It is thick, dense, and uncompromising, a wall beyond walls. So before I started this recording, I think it was last night actually when I shuffled, I tuned in and I said, what does this look like, or how does it feel? And so whenever we are moving from being inside of the matrix, and there's that wall, if we think about like a wall going this way, we're inside the matrix on this side of the wall, and now we're moving through to get to the other side where the matrix does not exist in its entirety as it does right now. It was a wall of electricity, though. And so that means that we get zapped, right, as we are moving from one side to the next. It is wholly uncomfortable coming to the realization that you've been kind of caught in a, creation of reality that is not by your own design, right? It's kind of like those larger forces at play, that sometimes we don't even fully see or understand, that are influencing us on the day-to-day and in our personal lives. Then it says, with every bramble, thorn, and stone, it simply states, no more, child. And that's where a lot of intuitives, I feel, have gotten. We've gotten to the absolutely not, no more, screw this. I'm seeing tons of crash outs across the internet where people are on that 3D sort of reality, saying like, I work 2 jobs and it's still not enough to make ends meet, and I can't keep doing this. So there's a realization of it, although they may not have taken many steps to kind of untangle themselves yet. But what I'm seeing is the intuitives, who are always guided to kind of jump off the edge before the rest of the collective there, so we can have some force, or some insight rather, to turn around and to tell you what's going on, right? But we have also taken action. We've also made some changes in our personal lives already. So I know this entire year, around the election, my guides woke me up and I already knew. I said, okay, y'all are going to be slow walking me to, untangle myself from this matrix. I already knew it, because this is not like it's a new thing that came up, right? All throughout my life, I've been looking and saying, this ain't right. Why are we doing this? Why are we living like this? And for one short period of time, I thought, okay, well, maybe it was because I couldn't navigate the matrix the way that other people did. And so I didn't fully understand it, right? And so let me just try a little harder and see. And so I did that too. I had that experience too. And knee deep in the matrix, fully, complacent and complicit and just grinding away and doing my thing. And I still came to the same realization. And now on this side of it, I'm like, even if I can, I don't want to. And also I can't to really. And so that's why lots of intuitives, I feel, it's been an ongoing theme, right? And here it is just roaring and saying, hey, it's time to climb all the way out the best you can, given that we may not all, we may not completely become untangled, because there are always things, at least down to the finite, like, well, paying the electricity bill to keep the lights on, that may be a part of our reality, which is also a part of the matrix in a way. So there's that. Okay. And there are doors opening all around you, just not the one you planned on walking through. Hello. If you are honest and courageous enough to accept, adjust, and adapt, the dead end becomes known as life's beginning. Yes, most definitely. So we got to open our eyes, and many people are doing that. With this apocalypsis card, it's hard to say. This makes me feel like it was all divinely timed. It feels like absolutely no coincidence. And is that clear for you guys? There we go. It feels like it was absolutely no coincidence that this has come about on a mass scale, the way that it has come about, for the sake of us all collectively evolving together. This card is like the apocalypses on top of apocalypses, that are happening, big and small, right? In the political sphere as well as the personal. So this card is a part of the initiations in the deck. And we have officially been initiated as humanity on a global scale, throughout the country, in our community, and personally in our inner workings, right? We have been initiated. And it says all kinds of things will be revealed during a time of apocalypses, from big global lies to little white ones that lace the bedroom sheets. Brace yourself for the horse of truth to storm your every field. And I love that part where it says that lace the bedroom sheets, because it tells me that we cannot even ignore it if we wanted to. It is so in our space, intimately showing up in our everyday existence. In the light, it's the unknown becoming the known, and it guides the way. In the dark, it's nihilism, fatalism, and hopelessness. Okay? And so this card is also giving me the feeling of revelation, right? So again, no coincidence that is showing up right now during the age of remembrance, during the age of Aquarius, while we are all collectively trying to get this focus, while we are all collectively like evolving here. An apocalypse indicates a particularly painful time. Yes, one that unfolds when two disparate dynamics occur simultaneously, pulling the psyche in seemingly opposing directions. The first is a lifting of the veil. Yes, we know all about it. This means truths that have been kept in the dark are revealed, seen, and unearthed. No matter how revealing it is, to witness them come into the light, an element of despair and grief follows. That element of despair and grief that follows is us realizing that life is not, what we thought it was supposed to be, what we were told it was going to be, right? And there may be some grief for some people, right? The second dynamic is the regeneration that comes from the wreckage of the revealed truth. The old narrative breaks and a new story forms. Yes. Apocalypse's energy is similar to a forest fire, devastation for the sake of regeneration. The veil lifts and we see who and what has been hiding. From the nakedness of the truth, a child is born. Have faith in the process. Hold on to your center. This is the only way. Yes, and then I love that the next card is the storm. So whereas this is divinely guided, we've got the storm that is also like the Tower card in the tarot, in this deck, right? And just look at that. Things are separating, things are chaotic, and we know storms. You know, when it was talking about the earth's or that forest fire, we know that storms have on the other side of it a regenerative purpose, right? It can feel chaotic and crazy, and we don't know if the roof of the house is going to fly off or if the house itself is going to be floating down the river. But we know that eventually, even if some things are lost throughout the storm, we'll get to the other side where there is a clearing. And before I read a little bit about this card, I would just want to pop back to the Apocalyptus card. And I mentioned that it is divine timing. And so we can also think about the things that are aiding us, right? That we understand or that we have learned about, such as Three-Eye Atlas that is coming in, and not particularly for us, for humanity in general, but it is coming in, as I have understood it in meditation, to help adjust the earth in terms of Mother Nature and to work with some of those living beings and earth beings that exist, right? It feels very much like it is addressing those lower dimensions that I mentioned, like the earth's core and the earth's crust. And for that reason, we will also be affected by that in a positive way. Now, it may seem a bit chaotic while it's happening, but we will get through it. So the storm says, the storm's intention is to rebalance your equilibrium. It is a result of precarious conditions, not the cause of them. And so the precarious conditions are, again, that matrix that we are all waking up to, right? That is glitching. That is a house built on sand right now. And they keep slapping more stuff on top, trying to make it hold together, but it ain't holding, right? A lot of us are seeing right through it. And so in the light, meaningful obliteration and annihilation, and in the dark, meaningless disorder and dysfunction. The storm lays bare the truth that there are forces larger than you. This understanding is a relief, but also a predicament of power that requires your surrender. And so we'll talk a little more about surrender when we get over to this card, because that is a part of its message. But the storm, possessing an energy much like the Tarot's Tower card, the storm undoes it all. Everything that was solid, known, and relied upon is stripped away by the winds of fate. The ground becomes the sky becomes the center, and the center disappears. The storm is a great equalizer. No matter how far we've come on the path, no matter our age, wealth, or wisdom, right? No matter how much money they got in the bank, no matter how much money they are grifting through the government, they cannot outrun the storm, because it is a divinely timed and orchestrated initiation for humanity. So their disturbing howls stir anxiety and make it impossible to see and think straight. Yes, yes, they are the agents of chaos, right? You must wait it out. If you try to fight the storm, you will lose. A better option is to seek temporary shelter and a reliable friend. When all else fails, go within. There for a moment you settle into the eye of the storm. So being in the eye of the storm, where lots of people are right now, looking around like, nope, this ain't it. I don't choose that. I'm leaving that alone. Instead, I choose this, right? Is a safer place to be than to fight against the storm, because that's when we get the inertia. That's when we get the hopelessness. That's when we get the fear. So then we move to the tear after the storm dies down. Now this is giving the element of water, right? And so there was, I was in meditation the other day, and so I mentioned that one meditation, or in the last video that I did where I was talking about Earth 2, I was in meditation and my guides were showing me this other planet that was literally a copy and paste of Earth 2 at a previous version, right? Right before religion became so heavily a part of the control that was created to, strengthen the matrix that we exist within. And they had me in a meditation. And what I didn't realize at that time is that it was also connected to my, the Sekhem, Egyptian Reiki energy that I have been practicing recently. And so one of those symbols, it's the earth symbol, right? And that Sekhem Reiki energy, it uses all of the elements. That's just a part of the many symbols that are utilized in order to tap into different frequencies and help activate people and clear things and heal, etc. Right? And so in another meditation, they showed me a drop of water. I was literally inside a drop of water. And it took me a minute to realize, it always does. And I'm like, okay, where am I? And they had me inside of one single drop of water. And what they showed me were the components up close of hydrogen and of oxygen, and how many of those components make up these drops of water, right? And it's amazing that even within water, there is a structure, there is a matrix. So a matrix is not inherently good or bad, right? It just is the container for something to exist. But when we've got people who want to control the matrix for their benefit only, and not for the benefit of those that exist within it, then we've got a problem. Then it becomes down on this 3D level where we understand it as a good or bad thing. Okay, but on the other side of the storm is the tear. And now this is showing up in this deck as one of the tools. It comes in after the storm to kind of not subdue, but to satiate and to ground again and to help regenerate and to help clear and to help cool and calm the chaos, right? The tear is powerful and it is possible to be subsumed in its waters. Find a supportive space or a supportive place to open the floodgates. And then in the light, it says melody, melancholy, flowing through. And in the dark, it's drowning, it's drama, it's murkiness. Okay, and so that helps me, or that makes me feel like with this storm, right? Many people's understandings of, like I was saying, what life is supposed to be, is just going to be shattered. Their identities shattered, their understanding of things shattered, especially if they are just now waking up, right? If they haven't had years like the intuitives have in terms of being awake and looking at society like what the hell's going on, if they are not in that group of people and yet they are just now waking up, they are going to grieve. They're going to be grieving what they thought life was, what it once was, how it was supposed to be, and how much work. There's like this idea that when you invest so much, right, you can't hardly let it go because of the loss or the fear of the loss of that investment. And I feel like this card is talking about that. Like when we're breaking away from this matrix in a collective way and life is no longer looking the way that it was, quote, supposed to, and lots of people are struggling with that, there's going to be a deep, profound sense of loss for some of us. And for others who have been waiting for the day, like me, like, oh, hey, now we get to go live. Who knows? My guides might have me in the middle of a forest, as a crazy lady who lives in the woods. And I guess we shall see, right? Dot, 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 to be continued. But for lots of people, there will be tons of grief around this. Okay, and then we have the riddle card. Now, I love this card, absolutely love it, although it can be confusing to some people. But, I call myself a channel for spirit and transformation, and I am a psychic medium, right? And so this riddle always reminds me of that place where, yeah, we're in the in-between. No, it's not a place where we wait. We have made many decisions and gotten to the to the point where we are now. But sometimes we don't have all the answers. Sometimes we don't know what the next step is. And thinking or believing that we're supposed to constantly be moving, constantly be grinding, constantly be going. And if we aren't in total production mode all the time, then something about our worth, right, diminishes, which is complete BS, which is an idea connected back to that matrix, right? But this riddle card says, hey, it's all right to take a step back and to rest because it might take a little more to figure out things than it normally would. And in fact, that place of rest is a part of the process. You know how liberating it is, although it won't feel like this in the beginning, but you know how liberating it is to just throw your hands up and say, you know what, I don't know. I don't know. I've made the decisions, I've taken the guided action. I am at a place where I'm not sure about the next step, but I know that it is coming. And so in this moment, I don't know. Let me know the next step when you can, universe, and make it plain so I don't miss it. That has been one of the things that I have said many times, especially earlier this year. And then I would go off and I would do something that humans do to take care of myself. I'd feed myself. I'd watch a show. I'd take a walk. I'd look out the window at the trees. I'd hang out with a friend, right? Because this tier is also about allowing yourself to be in the flow. And we say that, oh, get in the flow, get in the flow. And it's become like this standard sort of, saying that people don't really understand. But it's when you allow yourself to totally disengage, at least momentarily, from trying to make something happen, from trying to find the answer. Because then you find yourself. And then your vibration rises and your spirits rise and the air clears and you are in a position to receive. Right? So the riddle says, ponder. The coin that's lost in the river is found in the river. That's interesting. That's given me, look at that symbol in the middle. It's kind of giving me infinity vibes, right? How, even though there's supposedly 9 dimensions, they kind of reconnect back into themselves, especially with that first one representing the core of the earth and all that is, right? Who am I? The only way to work with a riddle successfully is to not work. When in light, a great awakening or aha moment. When in dark, manipulation, deceit, or trickery. And then it says go deeper. Each one had to go deeper, but this one is really fitting. Practice the Buddhist, I don't know, mind. Didn't I just say that? I just said it. I don't know. But I'm open to finding out. I don't know. But I'm about to get myself in a position to receive, so I do know. When the riddle is present, one must stop searching for the right answer. It cannot be found. And ultimately, it is not important. Rather, there must be a shift from the literal to the metaphorical, from logic to mythic. You are thinking too small and literally about the situation. The riddle card appears when the energy is deep and mysterious, like the elusive wisdom in a Zen koan. And I'm not sure what that means, what a koan is. But focusing harder won't do it. Neither will increased effort. Time, surrender, and humor are your only allies. Ooh, there we go. I was talking about surrendering. I was talking about getting into places and going and hanging out with a friend, finding some joy, right? What feels like the most pressing dilemma won't reveal its deeper wisdom for a long time. And you can make it longer by fighting against it, by trying to figure it out. Eventually, you'll learn a profound lesson from the riddle. For now, get comfortable with the limitations of your intellect and the reality of not knowing. It may, in fact, be the only reality there is for the moment, right? Get comfortable with the limitations of your intellect and the reality of not knowing. I love that. Because our intellect is wrapped up in the matrix that we are coming to realize that we're within. It's been conditioned by it, even down to our emotions. And so a thing like the 4th dimension, if it's that pass-through dimension, and it is the connecting dimension between the higher ones and the lower ones, and we've got things like 4th dimensional beings hanging out, wanting to influence, wanting to play out their fantasies in the 3D through us, and then we've got the elite understanding that and manipulating the symbols that garner even more control here in the 3D, the symbols, the ideals, the ideologies, the rhetoric, right? Using those things to garner even more control. Then we are going to be limited by our intellect because it has been primed by those larger forces at work. So when you even have something like white supremacy, right? And you've got those in power that want to keep it intact because it serves their agenda. It is a manipulation of the emotions, right? So through different tactics, you've got the ideology, you've got the words, the rhetoric, and then you've got how that makes a person feel. Maybe they feel included in a group. Maybe then their rage and their lack of fulfillment is justified, when really it's the matrix that's causing it. Right? It's this thing that was created to for the sake of having more control over them, that's actually causing those things. But then that rage and that lack of being fulfilled is justified through the rhetoric and through the way that they feel against other groups of people, right? So that's what I mean. And how, and then you can just look at this. Gosh, I wish it would come into view. Look at this card though, and like how interconnected and woven and enmeshed these branches are. And you got one hand at the center kind of reaching out, like, I'm pulling myself out. I'm getting out of here. Ah, there goes the focus. Perfect. Okay, and so for this card, the riddle is also a place. But it's also a card of understanding that you won't have all of the answers, like I said, and practicing that I don't know. I don't know. We'll figure it out. And so with that, I don't know, we'll figure it out. I mean, you can take an example of a 3D experience. Like I was saying, that family who, that person who has worked 2 jobs, for example, and might feel like they still can't take care of their family, who might feel like, I absolutely, most definitely cannot continue this way. That's the revelation of the apocalypsis card. I can't continue living this way. It isn't fulfilling. I'm feeling burned out. We still don't have what we need, and I don't have time to spend with my kids and my family. But then the storm is brewing internally. Well, what happens if I stop? Now we really don't have what we need. Now we don't even have a chance of getting what we need, because we need X, Y, and Z. And at least the 2 jobs cover that X, Y, and that Z, although there's no overage, right? And so their heart is telling them they got to stop. They can't continue doing this. But yet they keep showing up doing that because they're not sure of what else to do. And they certainly don't like the options of the consequences they are looking at based on the limitations of their intellect, right? And based on their inability to understand that it's okay to throw up the I don't know. It's okay to declare no more, as this card is saying with that hand coming out. It's okay to declare, you know what, universe, absolutely not, no more. I'm not doing it. I'm quitting that second job. And you are just going to have to, we will have to find some other way to exist, right? But there takes a vulnerability in that. There takes, some people might consider it a risk to get to a place where even though you don't have another solution, you let go of the one thing that you do have because it still ain't working. Lots of intuitives have already done this, though, time and time again. We know that in order to call something new in, you got to let go of something else. You got to let go of the thing that ain't working in order to create the space to call in something new, right? And so it takes, though, a level of surrender, a level of trust, a level of knowing that even though you don't have the answer just yet, you are making the decisions regardless, even if they are hard decisions, you are making them because you know something still, it's time for something to change. And then you trust. You throw up that I don't know, and you do your best to trust that the universe is going to bring you in your moment of clarity, in your moment of alignment, in your moment of being in the flow, the answer that you need. And pulling these 2 cards from the Celestial Bodies deck, this void of course. That's exactly what it's talking about. It's talking about those moments right when a moon finishes its cycle and before it begins a new one, where it reaches neutrality, where it reaches that still point of nothing moving in either direction, of no momentum pushing or pulling you anywhere. This is a practice in itself, to get to a place of neutrality, to get to a place where you can still your thoughts and your urges, and you're constantly trying to figure the issue out, trying to solve the problem in front of you, until you start moving again. When you master, I call it the art of neutrality, then you know that you've got a tool in your box to not only center you real quick, but then to allow you to pull away from all of the limiting thoughts and how you've been conditioned up until then in a moment, so that way you can clearly decide which way you want to go before moving anywhere, before moving in any direction, physically or emotionally or energetically. That's what this is talking about. This is a hard one for a lot of people because we are taught to constantly be producing, constantly be solving problems. But look what happens if we can master that. Look what happens if we get really good with that Buddhist, I'll call it a prayer, with that Buddhist prayer of I don't know. Then collectively and personally, we get to a place where the water is clear again, everything is nicely balanced again. There is a structure that has given way to even greater structure, right? We have recreated a matrix in our own design for ourselves and for the collective. And again, you know, a matrix on its own is not a bad thing, right? It's like, we can think about it like that inner container that keeps things together. That inner container of the earth that keeps humanity together. But we recreate it in our own visions when it's not so polluted by the less than desirable things that our current matrix is polluted by, right? And when we have allowed ourselves to draw from what our hearts really want, to draw from what we authentically need, you know, as individuals and collectively. And this card is so peaceful to me. Like, look at it. It's just, there's balance. There's cool. It just feels cool. There's symmetry. There's water. There is the Cancer up top. The Cancer moon, I would say, up top. This is representing to me like all of the more positive, and I'll put in quotes, traits of what Cancer represents, right? The balance of emotions and intuition and flow and heart-led, heart-centered endeavors. So this is where we got a chance to get here, and it may, of course, not be overnight. It most definitely will not be. Who knows if we will see it or experience it in our lifetimes externally, but at least we will be making our way towards that as as a humanity. And of course, there's the elements always of nature, because like I was saying, those lower chakras talk about Earth itself. And we've got Three Eye Atlas coming to help adjust or shift Earth through Mother Nature, on not on our behalf, so to speak, but it will benefit us, right? And this card is also talking about taking back the power of our creations, right? On that 3D plane where thoughts turn into things. Because if we are not so heavily influenced by what's going on in that 4D in terms of the manipulations, if we can understand that the spell has broken and we've really got a chance to see things clearly here and decide differently, and we take that chance, we take that option, as we are doing, even if it feels painstakingly slow, then we take back the power. Then we can do away with that war mentality that's playing out and fizzling, right? As the government tries to go to war with everybody, but won't take care of its residents right here, right? Because that's an energy that has played out, right? It's no longer upholding the matrix the way it once did. And if you'd like to get deeper into this topic, discussing more, learning more, understanding how it applies to your own personal transformation and the collective transformation that we are all experiencing and going through, then check out my 6-week online class called Energy Reset Work and Purpose. We go deeper into topics like this, especially inside of the weekly video calls. And if you're not quite ready for a 6-week class, then you can check out the free 6-day mini audio course that's called From Stuck to Aligned. It's a energy reset as well, and it gives you an overview of the class and some of the things that you can begin to think about as you go through your transformation. But okay, I will talk to you guys soon. Have a good day.